So earlier we studied the aggregated polyhedral nature of cells, and that they are polyhedral, meaning they have multiple surfaces, and this gives rise to cell polarity right here, and basically it consists of an apical, lateral, and basal domains. So this would be right here, as you can see, would be your apical surface. On the sides will be your lateral surface, and on the basement, or on the base, it would be your basal surface. And in all cellular tissues, including the epithelial tissue, there's an extracellular matrix, or ECM, as it's called, ECM. It's called extracellular matrix. And this extracellular matrix basically lies outside the cellular tissues in all body tissues, including the epithelium. This ECM usually consists of ground substance and other modifications that may be present from tissue to tissue. So basically, generally it consists of ground substance. Okay, this is a gel-like amorphous liquid or gel that contains things like proteoglycans, glycosaminoglycans, GAGs, hyaluronic acid, etc. that we'll study later in the coming chapter. In the connective tissue chapter, we'll go into the details of what those are, but just for now, we just need to know that the ECM or the extracellular matrix lies outside with the cells, and as we're studying the epithelium, then it allows the epithelial ECM contains the ground substance, and it lies outside the cells. Okay, and in the case of the epithelial tissue, this ground substance is present in the basement membrane. So right outside the basal surface, the basement membrane is present. All right. And this basement membrane is a membranous layer consisting of ground substance and other modifications that surrounds the aggregated polyhedral layer of cells. Here, it surrounds just outside them on their basal surface, outside their basal surface. And this basement membrane it generally consists of two layers. These are called the basal lamina and the reticular lamina, and these layers contain not only the ground substance, as we can see here, the extracellular matrix, but also some other modifications that are specific to the basement membrane for the epithelial tissue that we're going to study now. But generally speaking, the function of the basement membrane is to provide the support for all these aggregated polyhedral cells in the epithelium, provide support for them, provide them a medium of exchange of materials, to provide them a passageway for nerves to come in, and blood vessels right here. So it's a very important membrane that allows all these functions. So it consists of two layers. Let's get over here, all right, in a cleaner diagram. Okay, so it contains two layers. Let me draw a layer real quick over here. So the one right next to the basal surface, this is the basal surface, and right outside the basal surface is the basal lamina. Okay, and outside the basal lamina, distal to the basal surface, is the reticular lamina. Reticular lamina. And the basal surface of all the cells of epithelium are attached to the basal lamina. The basal surface is attached to the basal lamina by proteins called integrins that are present on junctions called hemidesmosomes. So there are junctions over here that attach the epithelial cells to the basal lamina, and these are called hemidesmosomes, and they contain proteins called integrins. Okay, so they contain proteins called integrins, and these integrins, what they do is that they link to the proteins called laminin that are present in the basal lamina. These are proteins called laminin that are present inside the basal lamina that allow the attachment between the integrins and the basal lamina. And this bond basically provides a firm attachment for the support and protection of the epithelial tissue from its basal side. So one anomaly, or not anomaly, but like one distinctive feature of basement mammara, apart from the general ECM that we studied, is that it contains laminin, okay, for the binding between the integrins and the basal lamina. Moving on to the second feature that the basal lamina contains is that it has a meshwork of collagen proteins. These are fibrous proteins that are present all around the basal lamina, and this is type 4 collagen. Type 4 collagen. And this is a meshwork of this fibrous material that not only allows support, but allows certain things like nerves and vasculature to pass through, and allows the exchange of materials. And last but not the least, we have proteins called nitrogen and perlecan. Nitrogen and perlecan are proteins that may be present in the basal lamina, and these are called nitrogen and perlecan. Right, and they determine how porous this basal lamina is, so how much of an exchange is allowed through this epithelial tissue, exchange of materials. So these may be important in tissues where exchange is going on, for example the kidneys, the lungs, etc. So far we've studied three things: the laminin that binds to integrins and hemidesmosomes, the type 4 collagen meshwork that is present for excess support, and nitrogen and perlecan determine the porosity, or how porous that is, porosity of the basement membrane. Now the distal layer of the basement membrane is called the reticular lamina, and this consists of usually consists of reticulin. It's also called type 3 collagen, reticulin. This goes synonymous with the name, reticular lamina, reticulin. This is basically type 3 collagen. And also, it also contains a meshwork of the anchoring collagen. Anybody knows what the anchoring collagen is? It's the collagen type 7. Type 7 collagen, also called anchoring collagen. All right, and both these collagens allow support and exchange of materials, and basically form a layer of the basement membrane. One thing I want to notify here is that the extracellular matrix that is present outside the epithelium, ECM, that we studied earlier, this is in a low quantity. All right, so we have a low amount of ECM that contains all the ground substance and all the proteins, proteoglycans, GAGs, that we'll study later in the next chapter. This is a low amount of ECM, as compared to something like the connective tissue, which will have a high amount of extracellular matrix. All right, so let's go back to our neat notes and see what we have learned. So we have a low ECM right here that we've studied, all right? And moving down towards the basement membrane, we've studied the basal lamina and what it contains, type 4 collagen. Extra stuff that it contains, apart from the general ECM, the extracellular matrix, is that it contains type 4 collagen, it contains laminin, glycoproteins that attach to integrins on desmosomes, and it contains nitrogen and perlecans, which determine the porosity of membranes, how much the exchange is allowed between materials. And the other layer, the distal layer, is called the reticular lamina and reticulin. It contains reticulin and it contains type 7 collagen, the anchoring collagen. And this basement membrane is visible on a microscopic slide, as you can see here. For example, let's go over here. And this was the respiratory epithelium that we saw earlier. And over here, you can see the basement membrane surrounding the respiratory epithelium. But we'll do a separate slide video and we'll note all of these structures later on a microscopic slide. However, there's one important thing that I want to tell you, is that you can't see these two layers in a light microscope slide. All right, so you can't see these two layers on a microscopic slide. You have to take an electron microscope image to see these, but you can definitely see the basement membrane on a microscopic slide and identify it. So that's about it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.